Hoping you could shed some light so that people can understand what to make when, for example, when you mention, hey, a lot of people are buying physical silver, things are harder to get, yet they see nothing looks like it's happening on the Comex. Well, hello there, my friends. Chris Marcus here with you for Arcadia Economics on Tuesday, April 19th. Hope everybody's having a great morning out there and enjoying whatever you're up to today as we dig back into the world of silver. Joining me on the line today is Andy Schectman of Miles Franklin. And I thought one of the things that would be helpful to dig into, certainly something I've been thinking about myself, is really the distinction between what we know as retail silver, which is the side that Andy handles, and then it's a bit of a different market for the institutional, and not the most clear setup, although something that I think would be helpful to get and put in perspective for folks. So, Andy, I appreciate you making some time, and thanks for joining me today. How is everything going with you?
It's going well, Chris. I'm always very happy to hear from you. Thanks for having me, buddy.
Well, I appreciate that, and let's jump right in. I think you get what I'm asking. Maybe I didn't phrase it as clearly as I want, although it's something I've talked about with Dave Kranzler quite a bit, where often you'll mention what's happening in the retail market, where it seems like silver is getting harder to find. And Kranzler's often pointing out, well, it's a bit of a different story once you get institutional, then that's when things really, you want to keep an eye on it from a bigger picture standpoint. My feeling is that on some level, we're talking about the same finite source of silver, so there's X number of ounces mined or recycled each year. Yet I was hoping you could shed some light so that people can understand what to make when, for example, when you mention, hey, a lot of people are buying physical silver, things are harder to get, yet they see nothing looks like it's happening on the Comex. So let me know if that's clear and anything you could shed light on there.
Yeah, well, I mean, if demand was related to price on Comex, the price would be triple what it is right now. The physical demand is detached from the price on Comex, and you know, I would think that anyone who is smart in the industrials or any of the very large institutionals should be trying to take delivery of as much silver as they could get at these levels. Heck, even the U.S. Mint can't get blanks for or 1,000-ounce bars to be sold to them to make blanks because they're not allowed to pay above the price of silver in the open market. No one will sell it to them at that price. When you see Silver Eagles at $14 over spot industry-wide, that's indicative of just how tight supply is, not just for the retailers, but even the U.S. Mint. So, yeah, I think there's a big disconnection between price and between demand. No question about that.
Well, that makes sense, although perhaps follow-up question is, what is it that needs to occur before the disconnect is forced to become connected again in some format?
I think what really needs to occur is that moment where there's a mass awakening, where you see some sort of a market collapse. And I think with interest rates where they are, there's a high probability it would be stocks, bonds, and real estate all at the exact same time. That awakening by the masses, not just by the people. And mind you, guys like you have done a great job of expanding awareness. There's a lot more awareness now than there ever was in my career. But still, it's minuscule compared to the big money out there, the institutional money, the people who just blindly give their money to hedge funds and financial advisories who don't care until all of a sudden they do care. And that's when I think you'll see the physical demand overwhelm the ability for the paper price to be where it is. And that hasn't happened yet. And a lot of people think Silver Squeeze should have been that. But to be honest with you, Silver Squeeze is a microcosm of the big money out there, or it was last year. When the big money starts running to silver, not only will this industry run out of product, but I think you'll see a major disconnection on the Comex price with reality. Real quick, you'll start to see that narrow. Comex price will start to take off based upon the fact that there's no silver to be delivered anywhere.
Well, that makes sense. Of course, the part that makes less sense is that as I sit here and think about everything I've looked at for the past 15 years, then I also factor in that, silver went to $50, 2011, came back down. Who knows what plunge protection team was involved in then. Again, we had the situation in 1980 where they changed the rules to tamp down the price. And as I'm sitting here a year later, all right, we heard what Ross Benham did, and I think we had a general idea of what was going on. And certainly when I think of it from anything I've ever learned of supply and demand in nature and free market forces, it says, yes, at some point that has to go up, although I wonder how long Ross can be successful with him and his friends tamping down the price. Maybe it requires a full unraveling of the U.S. government. It seems like they're trying pretty hard to defend that, especially it was also telling to me that while Ross was talking about what happened, he mentioned several times they were scared, there was a much worse thing, it was almost a catastrophe. So certainly, it seems like whether right or justified or not, they have a strong motivation to keep doing that. And I know I'm asking the same question over and over again in different ways, but I think it's that worthwhile. And
point. That's exactly the point, is that he tamped it down when there was a bunch of us, as they call us, silver apes buying silver. And it was the busiest I've ever been in 30 years. No question about it. But that still represents the tip of the financial iceberg. And I think that's really what it all boils down to, is that when you see a lot of the countries out there all of a sudden start to shed dollars to sell their oil in yuan, when you see people running from fascist type of edicts by governments and people like Trudeau, when you see people waking up to highest inflation since World War II globally, all over the place, people are waking up, and it won't take but one really, really, I think, awakening event, and it will have to center around people realizing that, hey, it's been a really good run in stocks and bonds and real estate, but even the best laid plans need to be reevaluated. And you're right. He was able to tamp it down because it was just us. And us has grown, but when us becomes everyone, that's when very, very, very quickly, I think overnight, people who have had strong fingertips, have listened to your advice, have accumulated silver, will become wealthy. And you know what they say, be careful what you wish for. That'll be at the expense of a dollar and people around you. But I really do think those days are coming. Honest to God, I think they are, and that's really the difference. Silver squeeze was incredible, but it's only the tip of the iceberg compared to the public at large.
Something you mentioned there, Andy, about be careful what you wish for when silver is $50 or $100. Is that a world we want to live in? And certainly I've heard that. I think there's value in that statement, although it's interesting. I actually had not an argument, but a heated discussion with a friend a while back where I was thinking that, yeah, for some people things are looking normal, but I mean, there's a lot of people in the U.S., I think, that aren't having the easiest time, and now we have Joe Biden saying with Putin's price hike, watch out, we're going to have food shortages, and it's just Putin's fault. And I wonder if it's like a lot of the things people were fearful of societal breakdown, the stuff that we saw with accounts getting frozen in Canada, and having traveled now, seeing it in different countries, seeing in Mexico the things that are the policies that are set emanating from the U.S. And I just wonder, it's a lot of the things that people fear about, like, hey, when silver goes up, that might mean things aren't looking so good. I feel like it's already happening here. Sometimes it's almost, as if people feel like they're watching a movie on TV, but outside of corporate America, what are people who are graduating from college with? I mean, Andy, you have kids in college right now. I mean, the inflation there is quite immense. Does that make sense? Where it's almost like people think it's not happening, and it's already begun. In my opinion.
100% it makes sense. And I think I would only add to that I think people are beginning to wake up to the fact that something's happening. The difference is, and I use the same analogy that I've told a few people before, is that we have grown up in an environment where everything just is okay. And it's like the money manager who lives across the street from me. He's one of the biggest in southern Florida. And I had dinner with him, and I asked him, aren't you concerned about this stuff? And he says, yeah, Andy, you know what? I was concerned about it in 1999. I was concerned about it in 2008. I'll just double down again like I always have, and it will go right back up. It'll be a buying opportunity. That's the mentality. And until that mentality is erased, then I think it's just a value and a subsidy for all of us. That's easy for me to say, and it's difficult for people who have heard this to agree with and to hang on. But think about it. I mean, we are poised for one of these events where asset prices across the globe are at all-time highs, and interest rates have to rise, either by edict or by the market making it happen. And when the rates rise, everything collapses. And this time, it's not going to be so easy to fix because the Fed has no tools. They can't come in and fix it. And it's at that moment that the really, really, really big money immediately gobbles up everything they can, from the mining companies that you interview on your show to every bit of physical that you can find. That's when it happens. And so, yes, I do think it's happening. We see it clearly. But when everyone sees it clearly, that's when it changes. I've been going around saying for the last year now that proc's getting harder and harder and harder to get. And sometimes people say, well, then, why do I still see it? You do see it. We still have it. We're still in business. But it's never been harder to get. It's never cost more money. It's never taken longer to get it. And this is when the public hasn't gotten it yet. Just us, the fringe, who see it. Wait until it bleeds into the mainstream. That's when Comex loses. And when you see JP Morgan coming into the market over the last few delivery months, taking metal out of their eligible account, putting it into registered to avoid a nickel moment, to avoid a force majeure or a real squeeze, we're getting closer than ever. So I think it's a fair question, Chris, and it's one we all think about. But honest to God, I think we've never been closer to that event. And, when you see Saudi Arabia selling oil to China for yuan, Nigeria doing it, Russia doing it, it's the beginning of the end as the dollar is the singular world reserve currency. Heck, even Powell came out a month ago and said, there's room in this world for two world reserve currencies. He's setting the table. When that table is set completely and dinner is served, that's when the mainstream wakes up. And for most people, it'll be too late because it's already hard to get stuff now. But when everyone on your block is talking about silver, that's when you'll know Comex doesn't have a snowball's chance in hell of staying the course the way they've been doing it all these years.
I hear you. And speaking of Powell, I feel like we need a good nickname for him. I mean, if Greenspan was the maestro, I don't know what he called Jerome. Yet, question a lot of people have been asking that pops up is that now, I mean, they raised a quarter point, which is essentially nothing in the grand context, although the bond market has been raising on its own far more than a quarter point. Interesting that yesterday on Monday we saw gold briefly cross 2,000 before getting hammered back down. You would think if there was ever a time for gold and silver to come in a bit, it would be at least when the Fed is raising interest rates because, well, hey, are they actually doing a significant hike? No, but to the degree that, the traders on Wall Street are saying, oh, well, that means less money supply reining in some of the dollars. Yet that's been out there and priced in now, and you still have gold at 2,000. So curious your thoughts on that as interest rates are going up. I know there have been many times when interest rates have been going up and gold and silver still rose. Although, on the other hand, is it possible that we get something like 2008 where silver goes from 21 to 9 in the face of, I mean, there you were having massive money printing amidst Lehman, yet it's hard to get silver. There wasn't much physical out there, yet the Comex price dropped. I know a lot of people are concerned about that right now. So what would you say to that possibility?
I'm really glad you asked that question, and that's a very important question. And everyone is always taught to believe that it's a rush to liquidity, that people throw out the baby with the bathwater when they get margin calls. There's record margin debt. But how many of these people actually own Comex gold or silver? How many of these people actually own enough metal to make that matter? And this time, the difference this time, in 2008, it was an issue of credit. This time, I think it will be an issue of the dollar chin. And so I think that's, and if not the dollar, the markets will take it on the chin. And there are no inversely correlated assets right now to the U.S. stock market other than precious metals. When that happened, it's almost as if they're trying to kill the canary in the gold mine to keep people from freaking out. The market's collapsing and gold and silver going to the moon. So the Comex comes in and they double down. It's just like the plunge protection team. This is the exact same thing. They come in and they sell futures. They drive the price down, and hey, everyone relax, nothing to see here, keep moving. And that's what it is. One of these days they won't be able to do that, because I think if the markets really collapse, and you talk about this great reset, Chris, and how it could happen. Well, when you have 80% of every dollar ever created in the history of the country done it since 2020, all of it pushing up asset prices to the moon. If you see a moment like OPEC saying, you know what, we're going to no longer take just dollars, and all of a sudden all those dollars come flooding home, and the market pushes up rates, really pushes up rates, and things collapse, now you can blame the Chinese and the Russians. You don't have to blame the Fed, because if the Fed was really serious, they wouldn't do a quarter point or even a half point. They'd go up to 3% or 4%. Why wait a month and a half to sell off their balance sheet? Why not do it now? And so even at a 0.5% on the next meeting, it's meaningless with 9% inflation. So, but if you set it up so that all asset prices are inversely correlated to a rise in rates, you weaponize the dollar, push the Russians out, and they go right into the arms of the Chinese with their CIPS, the cross-interbank payment system, right into their open arms, and you see all these countries moving away from the dollar, and everything collapses. You can now blame Putin and the Chinese. And I think that's what they're going to do. I think they want to blow up the system, and when the system blows up, they now have a villain. Instead of it being the Fed and their stupid policies, it's that evil Putin and the communist Chinese, and that's the only reason the markets have collapsed. And that's the seminal moment when everything that you've talked about tirelessly for the past decade comes to fruition. That's when it happens. So that's kind of how I see it playing out, and it being different than 2008.
Well, it makes sense. Perhaps the only part I disagree with you there is when you said that, this will happen and then they'll blame Putin. I mean, that's already happening. I learned over the weekend Joe Biden coined the phrase the Putin price hike in explaining how he said he's going to use executive orders to get inflation back in check to fight the Putin price hike. Maybe not quoting exactly, but that might require a weekend seminar to get my full thoughts on that one.
Yeah, I'd like to know what that executive order is.
Well, I remember there was an executive order in 1933 or 34 when they confiscated gold. Interesting. We won't go too far down the tangent, but you didn't have the Fed until 1913. Then 20 years later, to save the planet and the U.S., somehow they have to take everybody's gold, yet they can devalue it or short while later. But either case, last question for you today. people, one of the criticisms of the bullion dealers is that, hey, you know, the premiums are getting jacked up. Comex price is still down. I bought this silver, and you know, I'm seeing. It's shocking, actually, when you said 9% inflation, Prince. I guess 8.5%, 9%, but something about when you're hearing that actual phrase is like, oh my God. So there's a sentiment out there that people feel, hey, I bought it, you know, the price went down. Yet I was thinking that if you bought retail physical silver, I would look more at if you really want to sell your silver, what you could get to the retail physical, which is, in some cases, depending on how you do it, could be higher, a lot higher than Comex. I know every dealer is different. And actually, one thing that I haven't talked with you about yet, but would like to start doing is finding, you know, if there are people who, you know, bought their Silver Eagles and, you know, decide, hey, you know, while the premiums are up, I want to sell there. What could you say about the buyback process? That's something that I think could be really helpful for the market in general, so that, hey, you know, somebody's saying, hey, my Silver Eagles, they're at $40 right now, and rather than selling it for $1 or $2 over spot or under spot to some bullion dealer, what are the options out there, and is there anything perhaps that comes to mind of going forward to improve that process so you can – these are the things I think can improve the market, giving better liquidity on all sides so that, you know, people don't have to, you know, if they want to buy and sell, they can. If they want to hold for a long time, they can. But what could you say about the buyback side of that?
I'm glad you asked that question. I was interviewed last week on Dunnigan Kaiser's show, and I talked about just this, that if you own Silver Eagles, there was an opportunity. The opportunity is to sell them. At the time, I was bidding $9.25 over spot for them, $9.25, which equated to, you know, 40% premium or whatever, buying that over spot. And I told people that they could convert them into kilos or 100-ounce bars or whatever it is and walk away with a whole bunch more silver. We took in so many Silver Eagles at this point that we had to drop the bid right now a little bit to $8.50 over on trade. $8.50 over on trade. That means we make nothing on it. That's the highest bid price I see in the country right now. But the point of it is that you're going to get over spot on every single thing that you sell. But in this deal that I did, where we took in, I don't know, 50,000, let's say, Silver Eagles at 9.25 over spot, you know, that's $500,000 that is unhedgeable. I can hedge the metal content, can't hedge the premium. So it's an environment where the dealers are taking risk too, and are like myself, I have a bunch of Silver Eagles right now that have $500,000 unhedged sitting on the table. Now, if all of a sudden the U.S. Mint comes out and issues 500,000 Silver Eagles that they've been holding and the premiums collapse, then the dealer's in trouble. So it goes both ways. But the bottom line is there is not a thing that you could sell right now in the silver world where you're going to get, at least from Miles Franklin, spot. You're going to get much higher on everything you sell, whether it's Maple Leafs or 100-ounce bars or whatever it may be. As far as the sellback process works, it's as simple as calling, locking in the order verbally. We can assist on sending things back. And as soon as the bars are checked in and received, everything's trackable. A wire goes out or an overnight check. It's as simple as that. But, Chris, everything right now is trading at a premium above melt. And one last quick story to explain really how that works. If someone would have called me on November of 2019, let's call it the day before Thanksgiving, 2019, before any of us knew what COVID was, they would have bought Silver Eagles from me for $3.39 over spot. I would have paid $2.50, $2.65 over spot. Call it a 75-cent spread, buy, sell. Had they then called back after purchasing them the day before Thanksgiving, 4 months later in March or April, after COVID hit, I would have paid them $11 over the price of silver. So the premium is a function of supply and demand. And in the world that I see coming, where the mainstream says, I need some gold and silver, I don't care what it costs, that will be commonplace and probably much, much higher. So it's not just spot silver. And this is the reason to buy physical over paper. Aside from the obvious, you also get the premium potential that you'll never get on something that is derived specifically from the Comex fraudulent price.
Well, that makes sense, and I think a lot of us looking forward to when that finally happens, hopefully sooner than later. So in either case, though, I appreciate you giving some information. Not the easiest market to understand in my experience, and thank you for all that. And perhaps, Andy, in wrapping up, if people have questions, if they do have silver that they want to sell, I know some people think, because we're talking about silver often from the buy side perspective, because that's at least where I personally lean towards, but I do want to make clear that my goal is to give the best information possible on a rather confusing topic. So people are interested in buying silver, selling silver, buying gold, selling gold, or any of the other things that you guys offer, storage or any of that, can you just let folks know how they can find out more information, and if there's anything in particular, if they are looking to buy silver, that you might be for a good deal this week?
Absolutely, and I appreciate that. They would send an email to info@milesfranklin and say Arcadia Economics sent me or Chris sent me. Make sure Arcadia is listed in the subject line, because it's very important for me to give back a portion of every sale to you and your company so that you can continue spearheading information that no one else in this industry has ever done, in particular, like the Bart Chilton interview, the best I've ever heard, or Ross and Benham, all the things that you have done that is keeping people, even like me, interested, and even that rooster completely interested and excited and looking forward to the day where we're all right. Anyways, info@milesfranklin, mention Arcadia sent us. We will send you a current price list, and make sure that your listeners are getting the best price in the country. On special right now, we have 100-ounce Royal Canadian Mint, brand new bars that just came in, 100-ounce RCM bars at $4.45 over the price of silver, any quantity. That should be the best price in the country for the Royal Canadian Mint bar.
Well, I appreciate that. I may be looking for one of those soon myself. Last year, after Silver Squeeze, it was interesting because I was wondering, geez, could we be at a point where any of the, I don't know if I'd call them numismatics, but like the, not, standard rounds, the stuff where, it's like the Nikola Tesla ounce or stuff like that. Last year I was buying up a lot of those things, wondering, will that still be available? Now having some of those, I've been enjoying the kilo bars and maybe pick up a couple 100-ounce bars. I've been trying to diversify and not put everything I save into silver. I need a therapy group for some of that at some point, because I guess maybe one last point. I'm reading a Peter Lynch book, the guy who ran and was a successful fund manager for Fidelity and the Magellan Fund. And he's talking about how, well, in the end, if you're investing in the American economy over time, don't try and be a market timer, pick good companies. And I get that, although it's, not that there aren't good ones out there. I mean, to me, the good values seem to be in the silver miners, because what am I going to buy, Bumble shares or Snapchat or, some of these things that, and I don't know the specifics on either of those, but you just see this massive bubble in some of the stock markets and wonder how that will unravel. I can see, actually, if you have those rates keep going up and there's finally a popping of that, maybe it being time to jump back in, which by all means is just me thinking out loud, not licensed financial advice of what someone else should do. But either case, I find just having the conversation and discussing these things, trying to help answer as many questions as possible, to be the best way of approaching it that I know how, and appreciate you being a part of that. And thanks for joining me again here today, and we'll look forward to catching up again soon.
Chris, I love being part of it. And just one last comment to what you said. Look, diversification is a tool invented out of fiduciary responsibility by financial advisories. If you have a diversified portfolio, you have a sampling of asset classes, and all of the asset classes except silver are at all-time highs. So, diversification doesn't really mitigate the risk when you're talking about diversifying into markets at all-time highs that have an inverse correlation to an ultimate rise in rates. So although, and I don't think you need any any therapy sessions for not being the poster child for Finance 101. You're very smart, and it's difficult, I think, having conviction to take a position the way that you have. I've been doing the exact same thing for years and years, and while I may have not have made as much money as I could have along the way, I certainly haven't lacked for sleep at night. And I think by you being honest that way and telling people that's how you feel goes a long way. It does with me. In a world where we're taught to diversify into traditional assets, 60% stocks, 40% bonds, is going to end very, very badly for people when this all breaks apart. So that's just my 2 cents.
Yeah, a good point, because it's something I've been thinking about a lot lately, where really getting into metals, especially really in a bigger level in 2011, and looking at what the stock market has done since then. And I think it's only what good would it be doing if when things, all right, well, certainly if I had money in the stock market as opposed to silver over the last 10 years, that would have done a lot better. And obviously it's easier looking back in hindsight, but those are the kind of things that I review and think about and like to think is what gives value to the analysis. And because at the end of the day, the thing that was tricky to me, just tricky to me then as it is now, is that, all right, at any point, if they ever do finally raise interest rates and pull the carpet out from the stock market bubble, what happens then? And that's a question that, is always out there, and perhaps we'll leave that for people to think about and reflect on their own, which I think in the end is what is really more valuable than anyone else telling you what you should do, but at least explaining the various factors that are out there and having full information, and then being able to make a decision that you feel confident with and can live with the results of that. So either case.
Well, that's the thing that you're really good at, Chris. Everything you've ever done makes me think. You're very thought-provoking. You don't have to have the answers for everything, but you have the courage to bring forward the question, and that's the most important thing, because no one has any answers when we're so far deep in uncharted waters. But I, for one, think you're spot on, and we'll see this through together. I appreciate you having me on. I'm always here if you need me, and I hope you stay well in Mexico. I miss you. I hope to see you someday real soon.
Well, I appreciate that. Thanks for checking in, and we'll look forward to doing this again soon.
Thanks, buddy. Bye-bye.